What's going on, Chum Guzzlers? Welcome back to Bucket of Chum. As always, I'm your host, Captain Steve, and this is your Jaws 50th celebration episode for April 2025, and we're taking a look at Alligator from 1980, directed by Lewis Teague. Lewis Teague also directed CUJO, an adaptation of the Stephen King novel. The movie stars Robert Forster, who you've seen in Maniac Cop 3, Uncle Sam, Scanner Cop, Breaking Bad, and one of my all-time favorite movies, Jackie Brown, a Quentin Tarantino movie, his third movie, I believe. But, yeah, Robert Forster is great in this, but we'll get more into that stuff towards the end. I want to start this episode off with a little bit of trivia about the movie and as to how this ties into, like, Jaws' 50th celebration. So the first piece of trivia we have, John Sayles read Frank Ray Pirelli's script for the film once and then totally scrapped it. Sayles said it was set in Milwaukee and explained that the alligator grew gigantic because of beer from a brewery going into the sewers. So, I mean, they kept sort of the same concept, but it's not beer, it's like a pharmaceutical company. But I fucking love that idea, and I also toyed with an idea like that about a shark movie a while back. Yeah, I guess not a totally original idea on my part, but I mean, it still could be pretty fucking good. If anybody wants to make that movie, go for it. I'd watch the shit out of it. The next piece of trivia we have is Joe Dante was offered the role of director, but he turned it down. And according to the IMDb trivia, probably due to the fact he had already made a Jaws-type movie with a script by John Sayles, that being Piranha. And another really interesting piece of trivia I found, after Robert Forster's death, Breaking Bad star Bryan Cranston tweeted that he and Forster, who also worked on Breaking Bad, first met on the set of this film. Bryan Cranston was a production assistant for the special effects team, which is super cool. I think I may have known that before, but I totally forgot it, so it was like learning this all over again, which is pretty awesome. And why Jaws 50th? Well, this film was inspired by Jaws from 1975. Once you start going through the movie with me, you'll start to see why. But also, according, again, to IMDb trivia, like that film, the mechanical villain often malfunctioned. Much like Steven Spielberg had to on Jaws, director Lewis Teague either shot around the giant alligator to build suspense, or shot a normal-sized alligator on miniature sets, which is painfully obvious in some shots. While I say it's obvious, I wouldn't go so far as to say it's painfully obvious. I think this is like an awesome piece of filmmaking. I love it when they do these in these older movies. And yeah, it's sometimes obvious, but it still looks good, and it doesn't always necessarily take me out of the movie. In my opinion, I think it's fucking great. I don't know why this movie gets such a bad rap sometimes when it comes to some of the effects, because watching it this time around again, I was like, this is fucking awesome. I don't know what some of the complaints are. I don't really understand them, but I don't know. I'm a pretty weird guy, and maybe it's just because I watch so much other garbage that it just really didn't bother me. And also, this is not only a Jaws 1975 clone for involving a deadly creature that is larger than usual, but the three main characters are similar. Robert Forster is a cop, much like Roy Scheider was, playing Chief Brody. Robin Riker is a scientific expert, like Richard Dreyfuss's Hooper. And Henry Silva is a tough and experienced hunter, like Robert Shaw's Quint. Also similar is Perry Lang as a naive rookie cop like Jeffrey Kramer's Hendrix. I think that one is a bit of a stretch in my opinion, but whatever. If people want to think that, they can. And I mean, maybe it is. Maybe they did base it off of that. But I mean, some of these other characters, I'm just like, I feel like these characters would be in here no matter what, whether they'd made Jaws. But either way. The next one, though, is Murray Hamilton's mayor is a cross between this film's mayor, Jack Carter, and villain/instigator Dean Jagger, who shares attributes with Joseph Mascolo in Jaws 2. I don't entirely remember what they're referring to in that, but I mean, basically the mayor in this movie is also corrupt, just like he was in Jaws, so there's the connection for that. And if for some reason you haven't seen this movie before, let's get into the Letterboxd plot synopsis. It lives 50 feet beneath the city. It's 36 feet long, it weighs 2,000 pounds, and it's about to break out. A baby alligator is flushed down a toilet and survives by eating discarded lab animals that have been injected with growth hormones. The now gigantic animal escapes the city sewers and goes on a rampage, pursued by a cop and a big game hunter. And this has an average rating of 3.2 stars on Letterboxd, which is criminally low in my opinion, but we'll get to my rating at the end. Now for poster expectations, I've seen this movie before, I've seen it a few times, but the original poster is great. It's just the alligator in a sewer. Very straightforward, but it tells us exactly what we're dealing with. Just a big-ass alligator in a sewer. And before we get into the plot of this movie, if you're enjoying the podcast and you would like to support the podcast, you can go to patreon.com/bucketofchum. And each month I do an exclusive episode just for Patreon and some other little exclusives like wallpapers and occasionally newsletters, things like that. There's also a free tier that I sometimes post just trailer reactions and things like that just to, kind of keep things going over there. But if you can't do any of that, if you could just leave a rating or a review for the podcast, wherever it is that you listen, or if you're watching on YouTube, like and subscribe, comment, share the video, all that fun stuff. All that stuff really helps the podcast out, and I'm greatly appreciative for it. And one more thing before we do get into the plot, I will give a bit of a trigger warning here, I guess. There is some animal death in this movie, a lot of it involving dogs. A lot of it is more towards the beginning of the movie, but I'm not going to try not to go into great detail about it, but if that is something that bothers you, it is pretty prominent in this movie, so if you are planning on watching it and haven't seen it before, make sure you keep that in mind, and if you want to switch off the episode now's your chance, because we're going to start any second now. You've had it. You've lost it. We're going into it. All right, here we go. So this movie opens up at like some sort of fair or animal zoo type of thing, and we just see this guy playing around with an alligator like a trainer, and he is utterly destroyed by this alligator. The announcer's like saying a bunch of stuff about alligators and whatnot, and then this alligator just latches on to this dude's leg after he trips, starts doing the death roll, and just like mangling him completely. And there's a bunch of people in the audience who are just like, wow, this isn't real. Look at all the fake blood that they're using. But yeah, it's totally fucking real. So, and then there's this little girl seeing all of this, and she then goes and asks her mother if she can have a baby alligator. And now this mother is like, oh, you don't want one of those, they're so dangerous. Meanwhile, moments before, she didn't believe any of this was happening. She thought it was all staged, and now she's like, oh, well, no, it's too dangerous. But then she ends up caving anyways, and so they bring the baby alligator home. And this little girl names the alligator Ramon. And so one day she goes off to school, and while she's there, her dad is having a hissy fit about something about the alligator taking a shit behind the laundry hamper. So he goes, finds the alligator, and flushes it down the toilet. And the mother's like, well, what are you going to tell her? Like, I'm going to tell him it died and ran off or something. So yeah, this guy is just a massive piece of shit. But anyways, we kind of follow this alligator down the pipes until it eventually lands in a sewer. Then we cut to 12 years later, and David, played by Robert Forster, is at a pet store buying a puppy, and he gets paged away because he's a cop, so he gets paged away to go look at a body or something. Now, I will say, I don't believe his dog dies in this movie, which is great, because they set this up for, like, this could totally happen, but I guess maybe it's just to make him seem more sympathetic towards, like, the dogs and whatnot, but they totally set this up for, like, this dog could have died, but it didn't. So I guess that is one difference from Jaws. No, not really, because there's a bunch of dog death after this. Anyways, moving on. So David goes to this water treatment plant, and they found some body parts floating in the tanks. And then this beat cop comes in and says, like, hey, there's this lady here who owns a dog. So, like, what it turns out being is that, like, I guess they also found, like, corpses of dogs, and one of the owners is outside. But the way that they, like, the dialogue is here was just very weird. But anyways, he goes out with her, and they look at the body, and she's like, no, it looks like my dog, but it's, like, way bigger. And she shows this, like, tiny sweater that she knit for it. And then they kind of pan down to the dog who's covered in a sheet. And it's, like, way bigger than this fucking sweater. It's, like, 3 times the goddamn size. So immediately, we already know something is up here. And then we see the pet store guy, Luke, and he is snatching up dogs on the street, and then he takes them to this place called Slade Pharmaceutical. And now he's told by this lead scientist dude, I think his name is Arthur, and he's like, oh, I need more puppies, and then gives him a bunch of garbage bags full of dead dogs to go and get rid of. So apparently they've been doing this for a long time. Pretty disgusting. Arthur does die later on. I'll tell you that much. He does die. I'm pretty sure at his own wedding, nonetheless, too, which is great. That's a perfect death for him, I think. And then we see David meeting with a coworker of the body that they just found and whatnot. And while this is going on, Luke is dumping the dead dogs in the sewer. Now, he goes through a bunch of tunnels, and then he gets to a ledge where he dumps them off. And then I guess one of them doesn't fall in the water all the way. So he climbs down there, and pushes it in the water and then tries to like unclog this tunnel that I guess he's been getting them to kind of flow out of. He goes down, clears the way. Then as he does, Ramon sneaks up behind him, and we get like the POV from Ramon. So much like we do in Jaws, we get like the animal point of view. And again, this just kind of works for movies like this. For me, it's a great way to not show the animal right off the bat to kind of build up a little bit of tension. And again, this is also probably because they were having mechanical issues and whatnot. But yeah, so we see his POV, and then we just see one of Luke's legs kind of floating away. So we don't see a lot, but like we hear the noises, and then we kind of see the after effect. And I think this sort of thing is like very effective. It's much more effective than it is in a lot of other movies because later on we do get to see the alligator quite a bit, I would say. I think we kind of see the alligator more than we do the shark in Jaws, I think. I don't know like if anybody's counted how many minutes you see each of these in each movie, but I feel like we see the alligator a lot more than we do the shark in Jaws. And then sometime later, David is called back to the sewage place because they've discovered Luke's body, or at least pieces of it. So he goes to Slade and he questions the head scientist, Arthur. And Arthur tells him that his research is like heavily regulated and that they only use pets from like the pound. And after they're done, they return them to get cremated or something like that. And that it's like very heavily regulated. So David asks like if it's possible for one of the dogs like to have escaped into the sewer system. And of course, Arthur just denies the whole thing. And he assures him that this could never happen. Arthur also tells us at one point that they cut the larynx out of the dogs when they get them so that they don't make a whole lot of noise. I'm so happy when this dude dies later on. It's so good. But anyways, Arthur then has a meeting with Slade himself, and they aren't worried about the police. They're more worried about like journalists getting involved and finding out the truth. Because I'm like, well, yeah, it's true. It's mostly the journalists that end up finding out the truth, and not cops or anything like that. It's fucking frustrating. Anywho, David and the chief have a press conference, and they're saying that like they've identified the bodies, and then reporters start asking if they have like another Jack the Ripper type situation. And then they keep going, and they answer a few more questions. And then as they're leaving, one of the reporters asks David about his old partner from St. Louis who died in a hotel or something. And this guy was just such a fucking douche nozzle. Like, he should go work for the press of the White House or something, because he's just completely fucking useless. The chief and David leave, and the chief tells him not to let that hotel business get to him or whatever. And then naturally the next day we see all the papers that print articles saying cops seek sewer psycho, even though they said they don't really know what's going on yet, but they're like, oh well, there's psycho in the sewers, I guess, which I'm technically true, but not in the way that everybody thinks that there is. And then David is going to go and check out the sewer. So he starts asking a bunch of beat cops to help him search. And everybody makes up excuses like, oh, I'm busy working, I'm busy doing this, blah, blah, blah. But then there's one young cop who's like, yeah, no, I'll go with you. So they get some gear ready. And as they get ready, there's some psychopath that just comes into the police station with this timer on his chest. And he tries to claim that he's the one killing everybody in the sewers. And so eventually they tackle him down and they cut the timer off. But it was just like a radio clock. It wasn't actually a bomb or anything, if I'm remembering this correctly. But yeah, he says he wanted to come down there and kill everyone. And what's weird about this is, you might think this makes absolutely no sense, and it kind of doesn't. But at the same time, people do this. When there's a serial killer announced or a big crime announced, there's a lot of people that go into cop stations and just confess to it, even though they didn't do it. It's just, there's a bunch of crazy people doing this. I don't understand it. I mean, obviously there's mental health issues going on there. I mean, if we had access to free mental health care, maybe we wouldn't be running into all these problems. But then again, what the fuck do I know? Next, David and Kelly go down to the sewer, and then Kelly starts asking David why he left St. Louis and trying to get some more info about his partner's death and whatnot. And then they just kind of shoot the shit back and forth as they walk down the sewers. And then they start getting lost because the maps aren't completely accurate, because there's a bunch of tunnels from the 1890s down there that just aren't on the maps. Maybe somebody should start mapping those out. I'm just saying, if there's going to be people going in and out of these tunnels, workers, maybe you start mapping some of these things out in case people end up getting lost down there. But, then again, what do I know? What do I know? I don't know anything. I'm stupid. And then they end up coming across a methane pocket, and so they put some masks on, And then David starts walking away as Kelly is looking into one of the corridors, and then we hear a splash. And so David starts calling out for him. He looks around to where he was, but there's no sign of him. And then he starts calling for Kelly again, and David then gets into the water, and he keeps searching in like knee-high water. And then eventually he comes across a light that I think was probably Luke's when he was going around in there, and it's all tangled up in some shopping carts. So I think this was the tunnel where he was dropping the dogs down, I think. But anyways, Kelly sneaks up behind him and grabs his ass, scares the shit out of him. And so this is teased with like a POV shot as well, so we think it's Ramon at first, but it's actually not. I like this. I liked it when they do this sort of thing. I thought it was actually pretty effective for the most part. And after talking for a couple of minutes, they decide that they should probably come back with a larger crew to look everything over. And so they start walking away. And as they look at the map, one of them has their like flashlights underneath their armpit and it's pointing behind them. And we just get this like really quick glimpse of Ramon in the background with its mouth open, and then like its eye turns red for a second just the way the light reflects off of it. It is so fucking creepy. It looks so good. I think this is probably one of my favorite shots in the entire movie. It's just so unsettling in a way. It's just really good. I can't fully explain it, but I really like it. And then as they're trying to leave the tunnel, Kelly comes face to face with the gator and he starts to shoot at it with no effect. David grabs him and they start running out of the tunnel, and the alligator is like chasing them down. They come across a manhole cover and they try to open it, but it's stuck. And then the gator comes, bites Kelly's leg, and then drags him away. So far, we've just gotten like quick glimpses of the gator, but it's done well. They're definitely doing the Jaws thing, right? Where we're just building up to this a lot. And I think they've done it the best way they could so far. I think they really took a lot of like the good things from Jaws and even maybe improved upon it a little bit to some effect. Because like I said, that shot where the flashlight is under his armpit and we just get this out of focus shot of the alligator just kind of lurking behind them is so goddamn good. Like, I don't know why I'm obsessed with this shot, but it's just so nice looking. So some time has passed. David wakes up in a hospital, and the nurse tells him that he was found crawling out of a manhole cover yelling something about an alligator. So he's wide awake now, says he's got to go and find Kelly, and the chief tells him that like they've had no luck finding him so far, so Kelly is very much dead. The douchey reporter comes into the room while David is getting ready, and then starts asking about his old partner again, and how like him losing partners is becoming a habit. And then the chief and David just keep trying to brush this guy off. And then David and the chief, I should mention the chief is played by Michael V. Gazzo. He's been in a few things, but I mainly remember him from Godfather Part 2. But he's also in Last Action Hero and Sudden Impact, so he's been in a lot of like really cool movies. But anyways, these two go and see Marissa Kendall, Dr. Marissa Kendall, who knows all about gators. And so David tries to tell her this thing was like 15 feet long, and naturally she's like, no, that's not possible, blah, blah, blah. So David's like, all right, great, thank you, and like he just goes to leave. And the chief asks like if there's any other animal that it could have been, but she doesn't seem to think so. So David and the chief are driving, and they talk about how disappointed they are that like she couldn't help them a bunch more, and the chief says, well, you know what, just take a leave of absence, and he hands him a newspaper. And it turns out the douchey reporter wrote an article about David losing another partner. And then when David gets back to the station, there's a bunch of cops like reading this article out loud or whatever. And at one point, David opens up his locker and they put like a toy gator in there. They're going to look really dumb later on. Then we go back to the hospital, and this douche reporter is asking the nursing staff about David. And the nurse just straight up tells him like, yeah, he was found crawling out of a manhole. He was all drugged up. We put him on drugs. Said something about a gator being down there. And I'm like, this is not something a medical practitioner should be discussing with a journalist. But then again, as someone who's been assaulted by a nurse before, this doesn't really fucking surprise me either. Anyways, the reporter goes into the sewers to look for this alligator. And he starts like staging some photos. Nothing crazy, like he comes across like the shopping carts and whatnot, and then he just kind of rearranges a few things to, I don't really know what the purpose was, but he's just like rearranging the garbage to look better, I guess. As he does, Ramon sneaks up from behind him and takes him out. And the whole time this is happening, we're just getting really quick flashes as his camera flash is going off. I love it when they do this in movies. Like they did this in the first Saw movie. They didn't quite do it as effective because you could still kind of see everything that's going on. But I love it when it's just like the camera flash just showing us glimpses of stuff. But this part very much reminded me of the opening to Jaws 2, where the scuba diver is attacked by a shark and it's just like the camera flashing and whatnot. Very much kind of the same thing. David gets the call about the reporter, and the chief shows him the camera, and then they get the photos back developed, and like there's super clear photos of the alligator. Like there's no question that that's what it is. So David flips through the channels at home later on, and then most of the news channels are talking about the attack, and then one of them is the mayor saying like they're going to spare no expense at finding this alligator. And then he sees Dr. Kendall on the TV, who's like, oh, yeah, no, without question, it's an alligator. But it can't be very big living in the sewers, because even in the best of conditions, like in captivity, they don't grow as big as they would in the wild. Clearly, that's not what's happening here. God, people. I think the lesson here should be to stop keeping wild animals in captivity, maybe, and maybe stop selling baby alligators. I don't know, I'm just saying. David just laughs this off, and then he goes back to work. And then the next day, or at least sometime later, we see SWAT teams start entering the sewer from like every entrance. They're setting up sandbags, barbed wire. They're getting nets ready and all that kind of shit. And then one of them even has a rocket launcher at one point. It's not even one of the SWAT guys. It's just like a regular beat cop pulling a rocket launcher out of his trunk. And I'm like, I'm sure that's standard police issue. Why not? And David explains on a map to the chief that they have teams entering at every possible point, and they should be able to flush it to the exit where they're all set up right now. And then Dr. Kendall comes over and assures him it'll work, and then he asks like who invited her here, and she apologizes for not believing in him, and he says, well, don't worry, I didn't lose any sleep over it, kind of being a dick to her. But at the same time, I get it. And then we see SWAT guys in the sewers banging garbage lids and hitting the walls, just trying to scare this thing out of the sewer, I guess. And we see a Ramon POV quickly as it ducks away from sight, and the SWAT guys just continue banging away and searching everywhere. It turns to night, and David is giving orders to SWAT, as they haven't had any luck yet. And then Dr. Kendall comes up and tells them, like, she had a pet alligator once named Ramon. I don't think they realized at any point that this was her alligator when she was a kid. It's just like, this is just for the audience for some reason. We didn't really need this, but it's kind of interesting, kind of funny, I guess, but it doesn't really serve any purpose as far as I can tell. Although I guess it is just more of a backstory on her and like why she got into this field of work, maybe. Again, I'm not entirely sure. And then David gets on the megaphone and he tells everyone to get into position because the gator should be coming out of the exit at this point, because all the SWAT teams have kind of like converged, gone down the tunnels, and like they should be like pushing this thing out. But then we just see the SWAT guys exiting the tunnel, so no sign of Ramon there. The chief tells David that they should get out of there as the press tries to question them, so they get in a car and leave, just leaving everybody else to clean up this fucking shit show. As they drive along, there's a bunch of kids in the street blocking, playing basketball or baseball or something. And then they get past them and drive off. And then as the kids play, the ground starts shaking. And then Ramon busts through the sidewalk and starts crawling onto the streets. And everyone runs off. And now this was like a mixture of like mostly miniatures, but we do see the gator actually walking down the street later. And it's just, it's miniatures with a full-sized real-life alligator just walking along. But we do get a lot of the practical monster effect in some of these shots, and it looks great. I don't care what anybody says. This alligator looks amazing in this movie. Especially, like, for 1980, man, I'm pretty impressed. I think it's fucking awesome. And as some of the kids are, like, running into the street, this cop car comes flying around the corner, and he veers to miss them and then crashes into a bunch of parked cars, setting off explosions caused by absolutely nothing. Classic 80s. But when his car stops, he sees Ramon headed for him, and he tries to get out of the car, but his door is jammed. So he climbs out through the window, but then Ramon is like right there ready for him, latches onto his leg, and with a little bit of struggle, he ends up pulling this cop's leg off. I didn't realize that alligators ate pork, but I mean, here we are. We have it right here on fucking film. And one of the kids that was playing ball, we see him go into his apartment, and his mother is sitting there drinking a beer on the phone, just being all around awful. She's like, "What are you doing, Billy?" And he's like, "Alligator." And she's like, "What are you rambling about? I'm on the phone drinking beer." But yeah, I'm like, this was just like my childhood. But anyways, this kid grabs a knife and goes running out the door. And then as the chief is yelling and David is on the radio, Dr. Kendall comes up to them and says that like he should be headed for the water. And then we see the mayor yelling at the chief to basically not fuck this up because this could be good publicity for them. Ah, mayors, what a bunch of cunts. And then David and Dr. Kendall find Knife Kid. This kid doesn't do anything with the knife. We don't really see anything with this. I don't know if there was a deleted scene or why we even needed to see that, but yeah, the kid just describes to them like how big the alligator is, and like this is the moment where Kendall finally believes like David. I think this is where she finally realizes that this thing is much bigger than she originally anticipated. The next day by the water, we see Kendall taking a casting of the footprint, and then she realizes again like how big this thing really is. And David confirms with her that it is indeed an alligator. And there's explosions going off in the water behind them because the cops are trying to scare it out of the water by like dropping dynamite in, I guess. And then the mayor comes over to them and he says he's got Colonel Brock. He flew in Colonel Brock to come in and take over because he's hunted big game animal all over the world. And then Brock tells David to stay out from under his feet. And then Kendall tells the mayor that, like, it's not David's fault that the alligator got loose. Like, we don't really know why he's getting shit for it. And then Brock asks, like, oh, who's this pretty lady? And so she introduces herself, and he's like, oh, you're the expert. Well, you can go back to your books now. Fucking douche. They attribute this guy to be, like, a Quint character, but he's almost closer to, and like granted the movie hadn't even come out at the time, but the wildlife photographer in Jaws 3, where he's just really douchey and way in over his head. Whereas I don't feel like Quint was necessarily in over his head. Like it was definitely more than he anticipated. But I feel like this guy was just like a much bigger douche. And David being all pissed off that basically he's not hunting this thing anymore. He's going through the crowd of people, and there's people there trying to sell like alligator toys and all kinds of shit like that. And then one guy goes up to him with the shoebox and tries to sell him a baby alligator. So David holds him, and then he calls over a couple of beat cops and like, yeah, come arrest this guy for being a creep. And I'm like, that is true, but I mean, you probably need some more charges than that. But I'm not a cop, so maybe being a creep is a crime. Although if it was, there should be a lot more people in fucking jail. My God. We then see Brock doing an interview, and he's talking about gators and how romantic they are. He says they're a very romantic creature, and then he does an alligator love call for the reporter. I can't tell if this reporter's like into him or if she thinks he's crazy. Maybe both, not entirely sure. At Dr. Kendall's lab, David says the gator is still out there and they need to find it, and she's the only one with the expertise to find it. So I guess these two are going to go off on their own and try and, do their own thing to find it. So she shows him some samples under a microscope and explains how the small dogs became big dogs because of like these hormones or whatever. And then she speculates that this gator has probably been feeding off of the dead dogs for years, and like that's probably why it's gotten so big. We see Brock and some cops going down an alley trying to search for the alligator, but all they come across is a giant pile of alligator shit. How very exciting. And then we see Ramon just chilling in a swimming pool as helicopters fly above. And then David and Dr. Kendall pay Arthur a visit and start asking him about the hormones that he's working on and like why they haven't like put it to market or anything like that. And it's basically because it gave the test subjects an insatiable appetite. So that's why this alligator is just like fucking eating everything in its path, because it, like these hormones are just giving it like he says, an insatiable appetite that just, can't be fucking stopped. Then, right after this, we see Slade calling the mayor, and he tells him that there's something that he can help him with. And then, when David goes back to the police station, the chief then fires him and says, like, he pushed too far, he's off the force now. So, Slade, the mayor, all a bunch of corrupt fuck nuggets. So, David clears his locker out, and then he goes to the evidence room and grabs some dynamite and the timer from the guy who was faking the bomb earlier. So yeah, he grabs that and just walks out. I feel like if a cop gets fired, they should probably be escorted out so this type of shit doesn't happen. Although I think nowadays they probably have like an evidence lockup where you have to like sign shit out. So again, so this doesn't fucking happen. I mean, granted, in this case it works out, but like, maybe they shouldn't be able to just do this. Just saying. So he goes to Dr. Kendall, who's teaching a class, and then tells her that he's been canned. And then she asks, like, what's he going to do? And he says, like, he's going to find the alligator and kick its ass. And she's like, all right, when do we start? She's all in on this. So they start searching through the tunnels with the worker that we met earlier in the movie. I think I should also mention something funny, I guess. The worker's name that died at the beginning of the movie, or we see the body parts for at the beginning of the movie, his character's name was Edward Norton, which like just a pure coincidence because like actor Ed Norton, but like I thought it was like it's just really weird sometimes when you hear like a character's name that is like the same as like a real person. It's very odd. But anyways, they start searching the tunnels, and then, like they know they're in a horror movie, they decide that they should all split up. Yeah, that's a great idea. But anyways, Kendall goes down one tunnel, and she finds a dead dog stuffed into, like, some little spout of water coming out or whatever. So she then speculates that the gator may have a lot more stashes like this and then return to this area. Because what I think gators do, or maybe it's crocodiles, maybe it's both, when they kill something, they don't necessarily eat it right away because they don't have tongues or something. So, like, they have to wait for their food to basically sort of rot. So it's a lot easier to chew, I guess. So I think that's also partially, like, why there's some of these stashes of dead animals, probably. Again, this is just trying to remember shit that I watched on The Crocodile Hunter. Rest in peace, Steve Irwin. That's probably where I learned a lot of this. Or from Crocodile Dundee, actually. Oh, I should have covered that this year. Nah, maybe next year we'll do Crocodile Dundee on Patreon or something. It's been a long time since I've seen that movie. We then see the mayor and Slade talking about how to keep their work under wraps and how to avoid being caught. And this is where they're setting up the wedding. And I'm pretty sure this is where Slade says that Arthur is his son-in-law or to-be son-in-law because he's like his number one guy or something like that. David and Kendall go back to his place, and then she calls her mom, says that she'll be late, and then her mom goes on some about clothes she can't find or whatever, and Kendall's just like holding the phone away as she yammers on. Fucking been there 100 times. And then we go to a kid's birthday party. This is one of the best scenes in the fucking movie. So we go to this kid's birthday party, and it's like a pirate themed party. There's like 3 kids that go outside to this swimming pool, and they're putting one of the kids on the diving board like it's a plank. The mom then calls for one of the kids, and she turns the pool lights on, and we can just see Ramon just under the surface of the water, and this kid fucking screams, and he falls into the water, and he is eaten by the alligator. How this didn't turn more people off from swimming in pools at night, like the way Jaws did for like swimming in the oceans and whatnot, I'll never understand. Because this is probably my second favorite shot / scene in the movie. But yeah, it was just so good the way it was done. And like a kid death too, man. Like pretty fucking brutal. And then back with David and Kendall, they start to get busy at his house. And then while this is going on, Brock is out recruiting some young dudes to help him out on the streets. And then we go back with David and Kendall, and David talks about his partner and like what happened. And I guess basically David froze, and then someone took his gun and then shot his partner with it. So then she comforts him. We see a little bit of booby here. This movie really does just have it all. Maybe that's why I'm so happy. It just has everything I want. Just beautiful. Then we see Brock and his new team of misfits start combing an alley for the alligator. And then we hear some hissing, and then we just see the shadow of Ramon slowly backing away. And so Brock slowly approaches the area, gun in hand, and then Ramon just pops out of a big pile of trash and starts eating Brock. And he has him in his mouth and just starts chomping away. I don't know how Ramon managed to get underneath all that garbage, but I'm not going to question it because it was just fucking great. And again, this shot of of Ramon in shadow, like its silhouette, is so fucking good. Like there's a lot of really nice shots in this movie, I think. One of the dudes then comes, tries to help him, but the gun doesn't work, so they basically just run away. And then as David and Kendall eat at a diner, some cops walk in, and then they tell David that they basically had to just scrape Brock off the pavement with a shovel. And Kendall tries to comfort David because, like, while he's not sad Brock is dead, he's pissed that, like, people are still dying. And he just kind of brushes her off and tells him, like, to go see her mom because she'll be waiting for her. And then she drops some money on the table and leaves. And then David has a nightmare about Kelly dying, and he just like has this all in like red vision, slow motion. Those are just the worst nightmares when all you see is red. He wakes up in a sweat in his room, and so he immediately goes to Kendall's house as her mother is serving him coffee and whatnot while they wait for her, and she blabs on about all kinds of nonsense, just super annoying. And then Kendall walks in and he apologizes to her, and then they immediately go to her room, and he lays her down on the bed and asks if she's going to come with him. Huh, in more ways than one, am I right? The next day, they map out a plan to go to the canal where the gator might be trying to make its way out to the river. And then out on the water, some cops find the gator and start shooting at it with like little to no effect. And then they try to use some grenades, but they end up driving over the alligator, dropping the grenades in the boat, and just annihilating the boat, just up in fucking smoke. And then the boat also just like crashes into a bunch of rocks or something too. And then Ramon starts going after the cops. And then just as another boat is picking one of the cops out of the water, they have like a bit of a struggle, and then when they pull him on board, he's missing both of his legs. I wonder if this cop was a lieutenant. Maybe he was Lieutenant Dan. Lieutenant Dan ain't got no legs. And then later on, David and Kendall show up to the site of this accident, and David then realizes Ramon is headed straight for the Slade mansion that just so happens to be hosting a wedding. This is one of the best wedding massacres in a movie I've seen. I don't care what anybody says. This was a hell of a lot of fun. But so we go to this, and Slade is barbecuing, and the mayor is like trying to be all buddy-buddy with him, and Slade is just getting super fucking annoyed with him, doesn't want anything to do with him. As Ramon starts to make himself known, he starts chomping on one of the maids. That's one way to get out of work. And then people start rushing away, people are knocked into the pool, and Ramon is just whacking people with its tail, sending them like 20 to 30 feet away, and then just chomping on guests and whatnot. Like, when this scene starts, like, it just keeps fucking going. It is awesome. And so Slade gets into a car, he locks the door, and the mayor comes pounding on the window saying to, like, let him in. And then Ramon comes along, eats the mayor, gets him in his mouth, chomps down on him. Slade yells for his driver to like get out of there, and then Ramon just starts whacking the shit out of this car, knocking the doors off, breaking all the windows, and then he just whacks it so much that he basically just crushes Slade in the car, and we just see blood kind of dripping out. Thank God for that. And then when Ramon is going on his rampage here too, he does also eat Arthur, just gets him in his mouth and just chomps away at him. So Arthur is finally dead too. All of the assholes die in like one scene, which is just great. You know, we just get it all done and over with. No fucking around. Just gone. Love it. So David and Kendall get to the front gate, and Kendall tells the gatekeeper to let them in. There's an alligator coming. And this dude is checking the guest list, and he's like, alligator? Well, I've got a magician and all this here, blah, blah, blah. And then David gets out of the passenger seat, pulls his gun out, and says, like, let us in. So he does, and he's like, well, I'm going to call the cops. And they're like, yes, please do. And as they drive up, it is utter chaos. People are bleeding, running around, and they ask somebody, like, where, or they ask one of the guests, like, where it is, and so they point. They run to a fence, which has just been torn down, and we can see Ramon is basically headed back for the sewers. When they run back to the car, the chief has shown up and is like, David, I need your help. Like, fuck to it. Go get fucked. So Kendall and David go to the sewers. David climbs down with the dynamite, following the sounds of the growling, and then Ramon starts headed for him, and he shoots at him, and he starts running. David shoots at Ramon, not Ramon shooting at David. That would be a much different movie. Again, a movie I would still watch. And so we see a lot of real gator here, where they make like miniature sets, and then we just see it like running past some like pillars and whatnot. Again, there was just shots like this all throughout the movie that I thought were really fucking good, and I don't know why people don't talk about it more. I think some of the like filmmaking and cinematography that went into this movie is actually just really incredible. It certainly doesn't get the credit it deserves, I feel like. I feel like there's like a smaller community of people that talk about this movie, but not as much as they should be, in my opinion. I know I've said that a few times, but man, I love this movie. And as David is running away, he finds a methane pocket, so he leads Ramon there. So this is going to be great when the dynamite goes off, obviously. He sets the timer for 2 minutes. He starts to run off, but then Ramon tail whips him and knocks his gas mask off. And then David finds a manhole cover, and just as he's about to leave, this old woman drives over top of it, and she's waiting for like a garbage truck to move. And then Kendall gets out of her car and starts running to this old lady, and she tells her to move her car. And then David from down below says, like, yeah, move it, you asshole. And she's like, what did he say? Kendall just pushes this old lady into her passenger seat, drives the car off of the manhole cover. And then I guess at some point she gets out of the car because David makes his way out of the manhole, and they start running towards the grass. And then the explosion goes off. We see Ramon just like get blasted into a billion pieces. And I'm pretty sure the old lady's car also explodes. I don't know if she got out of the car or not, so I think maybe they just blew up an old lady too. Hey, I mean, one less senior citizen driving, maybe not that terrible. But then David gets bandaged up by an ambulance, and him and Kendall look down the sewer saying they got him. And then someone closes the sewer. We go down into the sewer, and we see another baby alligator landing into the sewer, and then credits roll. This, by far, is one of the best, and I mean, like, actually good Jaws knockoffs. Like, I think movies like Great White and Cruel Jaws are fucking awesome, but they're not good movies. This, in my opinion, is, like, a legitimately good movie. I think the acting is pretty top-notch for what this movie is. I think the special effects are incredible and do not get talked enough. I also think maybe because when this movie came out, I think when Scream Factory released this, I have the 4K Blu-ray right here. I feel like not all of the gore and whatnot was in the movie, but I'm not 100% sure. There are a couple of different versions of this movie. There's the theatrical cut and the TV cut, but I'm pretty sure I watched the theatrical version, so all of that stuff was in there. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know why more people aren't talking about this movie as they do like Jaws and things like that, because I think this is like one of the best fucking creature features ever made, in my opinion. I know that's a pretty strong statement, but like this movie is incredible. I loved every second of this. Like it's so much fun. The way that they use like a lot of smaller sets with the miniatures and the full-size gator, and then even the shots that we do see of the animatronic gator are really good. And I feel like they built a couple of different ones. So they had like the full-size gator, which I watched some of the special features, and the special effects guy who actually made the gator says that they basically had like these technicians inside the gator itself to help make it move. Now, granted, they couldn't make it move a whole lot, which is why we get some of those quick shots. But I think that the way that they did it really works. I don't know. There's just something about it that really made it all come together. Like, there is such a decent amount of blood and gore and practical effects. And listen, as much as I love me some terrible CGI sharks and all that, it does not compare to these old school practical effects. That being said, this movie is like 4 or 5 stars for me. Like it's a masterpiece. If you haven't seen this one, I highly recommend it. I know dog death is always shitty in movies, but the rest of the elements in this movie make up for it, in my opinion. But that is it for me this week. Have you guys seen Alligator before? Let me know in the comments down below if you have, what you think of it. Am I crazy for liking this movie as much as I do? But yeah, that's it for me this week. That has been your Jaws 50th celebration episode for April. Over on Patreon, I'm going to be covering the movie Crawl from 2019 by Alexandra Asia. I saw that movie in theaters. I'm a pretty big fan of it. I do have my issues with it, but I'll get into that when I actually do the episode. So if you want to hear that, make sure you go and sign up for the Patreon. But otherwise, I'll see you guys next time for even more Bucket of Chum.